This video is intended to help you to organize a self-guided canoe trip down the Missinaibi River. The Missinaibi River is in northern Ontario. It is Ontario's longest undammed river at 500 kilometers, and it is also a wilderness area that has a provincial park to protect it. So for people looking for a wilderness canoe tripping experience, this is one of the icons. If you're a canoe tripper in Ontario, sooner or later, you're going to want to do the Missinaibi River. So the river has some calm water, as well as some class 1, 2, and 3 rapids. The upper Missinaibi River is famous for awesome rapids of all manner. Because it's a provincial park, the portages are well indicated, and with a good map, you'll be able to come up ahead of time to scout the rapids, and you can portage around any of the class 3 rapids if you don't like the look of them. The river is also really significant geologically or geographically because it's where you leave the Canadian Shield and drop down into the Hudson Bay lowlands. So for that reason, it's really interesting. You cover a long distance. You're also coming from the territory of the Algonquin peoples into the territory of the Cree, and that's also really significant. And in fact, Thunderhouse Falls is a really significant location for Indigenous peoples. There was also a pictograph site at Ferry Point in Missinaibi Park. And then the river itself is traveled by all manner of Indigenous peoples, and also the voyageurs and the fur traders. And there's actually the remnants of an HBC post on Brunswick Lake. So for those reasons, the Missinaibi River is a really well-known canoe tripping river. So because it's a well-traveled river, there's tons of information available online. And if you Google Missinaibi River canoe trip, you'll get all kinds of information. Here's an article, a website by Kevin Callan, who is one of the great figures of Ontario canoe tripping, if not Canadian canoe tripping. So that's a pretty extensive site about the Missinaibi River. You can also go to the Canadian Heritage River System website to see information about the Missinaibi River. There's great pictures and descriptions of the natural history, as well as the cultural heritage and the recreational value of the river. So where is the river? Well, its headwaters are in the Chapleau Crown Game Preserve, which is the world's largest game preserve. So if you're coming from Toronto, you'll be probably coming right up to Sudbury, and then driving up towards Chapleau. My friends and I usually make Timmins our home base because it's kind of halfway between the put-in and the takeout. So it's a nice central location. Also, if some of your paddlers are flying in, they can, there's great hotels and amenities in Timmins as a city in the region. If you're coming up from Ottawa, you'll probably be coming up from North Bay and driving up the 11 here. So going by Temagami in that region. And so then to put in, I recommend most people go in at Barclay Bay. So they go up this road right into the Missinaibi Provincial Park. And here, do not rely on satellite, Google, Apple, or any of those other types of mapping software. They tend to lead you up logging roads, which can get you into a lot of trouble. You should trust your eyes and follow the signs and have a map and follow it old school to get to Barclay Bay. If you wanted to, you could put in at the town of Missinaibi and add a day or two of flat water paddling at the front end of your trip, which you might want to do in particular if you wanted to spend some time respectfully checking out the pictographs at Ferry Point. Just to give you a further sense, so there's Barclay Bay here. So the river flows by these train lines. So you also have the option of putting in at Folliette and getting on the train with your canoes and taking the Via train up to Peterbell and then starting your trip there. And some people do that. Just a warning, though, the train arrives around midnight, and Peterbell is an abandoned village, so there's really nothing there. So just be wary that as romantic as the train is on a canoe trip, and I'm a big fan of it, the timing of this one makes it a little iffy, and there is a great option of just getting a ground shuttle to Barclay Bay. And then you can actually take out at Brunswick Bridge, which is around here, and at Camp 95, and that's a great place if you're looking for a week-long trip. Barclay Bay to Camp 95 is five days, maybe 6 days if you're taking your time. That's a great place to take out. Again, hard to navigate to, so you might want to consider an outfitter for a shuttle. And if you continue for another couple of days, you can get to Matisse, which is a great little community on the highway. Great place to leave your cars. There is a nice parking lot with public washrooms, just river right downstream of the overpass. So if you're self-shuttling, you could easily leave a vehicle in Matisse, and that would be a good 7-day trip from Barclay Bay to Matisse. Then, of course, you could continue, or you could put in here, or you could continue from here. There continues to be some good rapids. There are a couple of sections of, I will say, vigorous portages in this section of the river, so you got to be prepared for that. But you're rewarded by Thunderhouse Falls, which, as I mentioned, is a really significant cultural site to the indigenous peoples of the region. It's a spectacle to behold, and it's where the river drops, essentially, from the Canadian Shield to the Hudson Bay lowlands. There's a great place around here at Bells Bay where you can take a float plane out back to Hearst. So another option would be to leave a vehicle at Hearst and then actually take the float plane back at Hearst. So it's a bit of a circuit there to cover, but easy to do. And then you can continue down the river, but beyond Bells Bay, the rapids start to peter out. By the end of it, it's really just current with not really big rapids to speak of. But in a few days, you can get yourself down to Moose River and take the train from there to Cochrane. So that's the other kind of self-shuttling option. And then it is feasible to continue all the way to Moose Factory and take the train where it starts there to Cochrane. So that's basically your options. So a week for the upper, a week for the middle, and then a few days or a week for the remainder. There are some local outfitters, as I mentioned, that you should consider. Missinaibi Outfitters here is based in Matisse, so that's really convenient. They're the local option, so you should definitely consider them and see if they can meet your needs. There's also Missinaibi Headwaters Outfitters MHO Adventures. They offer shuttle services as well as guided trips if you want to go with a guide. And they are based in Huntsville. They used to be in Chapleau, I think. So if you're coming up from Toronto, you'll drive probably right by these guys. So you might want to consider that. If you're looking at the train, as I mentioned, it would be out of the Folliet train station here. Now, interestingly, Peterbell is not a scheduled stop. So what you have to do is tell them that you're going in the direction of Oba from Folliet, but you want them to stop for you in Peterbell. Thus, you really need to work this out at the train station and make sure they understand that. And then you'll, of course, want to reserve your tickets with VIA and let them know that you've got canoes and gear for the cargo part of the train. The river itself is inside Missinaibi Provincial Park. It is a unmanaged park, so you don't have to bother with campsite reservations or anything like that, but it does mean that there are privies and fire pits, as well as some regulations that you need to follow. For example, in Ontario parks, you're not supposed to bring in any metal or glass containers for food, for example, as well as other practices like no trace camping. For maps, these Chrismar map products are amazing. They're durable and accurate. And for the Missinaibi River, they've got a set of 3 that you can purchase. The first one covers basically the lakes. The second one starts the river all the way down to Matisse. And then the third map takes you the balance of the trip. I would get all 3. They make for a good set. The other reference document that you need to have is this Missinaibi Journey to the Northern Sky. This is Hap Wilson's guidebook on the subject. It's authoritative in all respects, great history and context for the river. And the best thing about it from my point of view is it's got these amazing maps. This is a bit blurry, but they've got these hand-drawn illustrations of each rapid with descriptions in different water levels. And he has given some advice on how to navigate those. But of course, you should be visually inspecting all the rapids before you run them. But it's great to have a book like this. And while some of the campsite indications are a bit dated now, in general, this remains really the best guide to the river that you can have. I don't know that it's longer in print though, so hopefully you can get your hands on it. A few other things to note. Here is Barclay Bay. There's the latitude and longitude for it. As I mentioned, there are organized campsites for car camping there that you can reserve, that you have to reserve in order to stay there, and a ranger station and so forth. Down here at Ferry Point, this is where the petroglyphs are. There's other sites as well, but that's the sort of popularized one. And then if you continue up Barclay Bay, you'll have the prevailing winds at your back. Great place for a sail, but here's where the river starts, really at Kittatinny Rapids, right there. This is the latitude and longitude for that campsite I mentioned at Peterbell Marsh. Fantastic campsite, not to be missed. So I just wanted to give you the latitude and longitude. Here's another great campsite at Wavy Rapids, but also Wavy Rapids itself is a great class 3 rapid. That is great for play. So you could surf or run the rapid multiple times. It's worth banking on a half day at least here to enjoy Wavy Rapids. Just a note on Green Hill Rapids. This is a beautiful set of rapids. It's about 1.5 kilometers long, I think. There is this portage around it, which I would recommend you at least take your gear down. The problem is you can't really scout the rapids from the portage because of the topography. So if you're going to run it, you really, you come downstream, maybe get out on River Right, scout it a bit from the land, but you're basically past the point of no return there. So you'll either line or run the class 3s at the top, and then you've got class 2+, and then this sort of dogleg spot here, which could be tricky in high water, and then the rest is really class 1 or class 2 for the balance. It's a beautiful rapid. It's amazing, but just be forewarned that it's difficult to scout. And so you may want to just portage around this one, depending on how you're feeling. This is the latitude and longitude for Brunswick Bridge. This is the Brunswick River over here, and this is the Missinaibi River. Camp 95 itself is actually on this side of the river, but here's where you could take out or put in along the route. Here's Matisse, as I mentioned, a great place to leave a car or be picked up on a shuttle or what have you, or start a trip if you want to do the middle section. And there's some amenities in Matisse. Just a note on Thunderhouse Falls. You may read that the Missinaibi River was, for some time in the 1970s and 80s, considered a very dangerous river. There had been serious mishaps and tragedies on the river, many of which stemmed from the fact that the maps for this portion of the river were not well indicated. So some maps showed what looked like a portage trail on River Right, but in fact it was a hiking trail for people coming upstream to check out the falls. Unfortunately, some canoers were looking for that portage and would get swept down the falls. So now there's a huge sign indicating where the portage is, and it's well upstream of the falls, and it is a mandatory portage. There is no situation where anyone could run any part of Thunderhouse Falls, which you'll see when you go. There are 2 big drops. There's a campsite at each drop. It's spectacular but needs to be respected. So there you have it. That is the Missinaibi River in a nutshell. I hope this is helpful to you, and I hope you make it out there, and I hope to see you.